And what was happening was my lungs kept filling up with blood. And when I got to the other side, it was as if it was a really wonderful kind of welcome party. And I was able to really stop and engage in the different levels of the places that you go when you get to the next place. And I remember kind of seeing ancestors and then seeing kind of angels and then a level of like saints and hearing I'll never forget hearing the Seraphim angels, hearing the music. And then I saw the master healer and his mother.
My guest today is Cathy Gabrielsen, who had not one, but two near death experiences. She has also had a few shared death experiences, which I think are so fascinating. I'm very excited to talk to her today because I'm going to ask her lots of deep questions and we're going to explore maybe some topics that we haven't before on this channel. So, Cathy, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, I'm so excited to be here. Topics I love to talk about.
Me
So
too.
thank
These
you.
feed my soul.
Mine too. We have had these experiences and they're meant to be shared for a reason.
Oh,
This is
absolutely. Okay, so you were very young when you had your first near-death experience in high
yes,
school, I believe. So why
yes.
don't you share that experience in whatever way feels good for you to share that?
Sure. I had my first near-death experience when I was just 18 years old. Had just turned 18 a few months before that. It was like my senior year of high school. It was that exciting time where you're going to go off to college and planning. And it was just a beautiful fall night. And I was with my boyfriend, my high school boyfriend, who I had been dating for a few years. And we were just on a country road and we came around a really sharp curve. And he was a teenage boy, probably going a little faster around the curve than he probably should have, but he wasn't being reckless in any way. And I remember right before that moment happened, I heard in my head just someone scream in my head, "Put your seatbelt on." I mean, this was back in 1988 and seatbelts were just becoming important. They were starting to regulate it then. And I heard in the back of my head, "Put your seatbelt on." And I put my seatbelt on at the same time. I hollered out to my boyfriend that he put his seatbelt on too. And the next thing I knew, it kind of felt like the car was rumbling and just a major impact. And what happened was, instead of going around the curve, he didn't make the curve and we went straight. And then, but what you didn't see was this huge ravine. So it wasn't within his eyesight. And we just went and slammed into the ravine. And we were so far down that it was hard for other people to see our car there. So I was in the ravine with him for a long time. And he was really just moaning, and there was blood everywhere and mud. All the windows and everything had been shattered. There was no windshield. So it was like right in front of my face was mud. And I was terrified. And I remember screaming and I just kept screaming. And I was one of those little timid little girls that never made a noise. And I remember that night I was screaming and he was moaning and he's saying out loud that he needed help. He kept saying, "I need help. I need help. I need help." And we were in the car for a while. And I remember kind of going in and out of consciousness in the car. And I remember somebody coming to my window and saying that they were going to get help. They were kind of climbed in and said they were going to get help for us. And that's the last thing I remember. And then I just kind of remember being in the car. I remember sensing, I didn't necessarily see the tunnel, but I sensed the energy pull and just a longing. It was like a beautiful starry night. And it was almost like as if one of the stars had illuminated. And I was on the other side and I was with like with beings. They knew me and it was kind of like they were having a conversation about me with me right there. And I felt like I was being healed. It felt like they were helping me and healing me. And they were deciding on what I was going to do. And I really understood that my dad was going to be upset if I didn't come home. Didn't come back. And I remember understanding on the other side that it wasn't my time and that I had to come back to heal and to heal my boyfriend at the time who was in the car. And the next thing I knew, I was in the hospital. I woke up in the hospital and my boyfriend had essentially died 9 times that night, and he was resuscitated each time and ended up suffering a traumatic brain injury. And so he could only blink his eyes for 20 years. That was all he did, was blink his eyes. And I had this overwhelming sense that I came back. I was in the hospital for a week, but nothing like what he had. And I really believed that I was going to come back. And whatever I did when I was visiting him, I somehow was going to heal him. And I remember putting my hands on his body and remember hearing him if he was hot and really sensing when he was sad, but never telling anybody this. And I also became really spiritual. I went to church every day. I became a minister. I just felt so drawn to God. And so I did that for years. I went to go visit him every day for years, thinking he was going to get well, and he never did. And then after 20 years, nearly 20 years, he finally passed away. And I was becoming really depressed and confused because here I had been told that I was going to be doing this healing work. I was going to be helping him to heal. I had a tremendous amount of anxiety, survivor's guilt, and I ended up with all kinds of illnesses, breast cancer, all kinds of stuff after that accident. So I went through a really big dark night of the soul after he died because I couldn't understand knowing what I knew being on the other side and then him not ever healing, him not ever healing. And then kind of fast forward a number of years later, I had breast cancer and I was having some reconstructive and some issues related to my breast cancer. And at that time, I developed advanced sepsis. And that near-death experience was completely different from the first one. And that one, I was in the hospital and I can remember being out of my body and seeing my body on the bed. And then when people would come to visit, I would say, I just want to let you know I'm dying. And they said, oh, no, you're not. And I said, oh, no, yeah, I know. And it was almost as if I knew the feeling of being in that space. And I think within first near-death experience, I just shut it down because I was raised Catholic and there's this idea of being too much of yourself. Like, who was I to be in the presence of God? And who was I to be someone that was going to heal people? And so I never told anybody, ever, totally, completely buried it. And then it wasn't until my second near-death experience, and I knew I was going into the light. And at that point, I really wanted to go. I had 2 kids. But when like you've experienced, when you're in that energy, it's just so enveloping. And you know, when you're in that space, that you know that everything here is going to be okay. And it always is okay, right? Everything always works out just as it should. And so when you have the option to be in that energy and in that love, I just wanted to go back to it. So from the time I had my first near-death experience until the time I had my second, I was of tremendous service, tremendous service. So I thought I had done all these kind of accumulated all these merits, like all these good, like I did this, I was a good this, I helped this person, I did this. Not doing it so that I would have a greater glory, but doing it because I wanted to. And I wanted to share the love that was so important. And so when I got to when I had the second near death experience, I just remember going into it and I was having a really hard time breathing. I was bleeding internally and no one knew it. And what was happening was my lungs kept filling up with blood. And when I got to the other side, it was as if it was, you're back, welcome. It was a really wonderful kind of welcome party. And I was able to really stop and engage in the different levels of the places that you go when you get to the next place. And I remember kind of seeing ancestors and then seeing kind of angels and then a level of like saints and hearing I'll never forget hearing the seraphim angels, hearing the music. And then I saw the master healer and his mother. And I just remember being in his arms and kind of, it wasn't like necessarily a life review, but there was a quiet conversation between the two of us about what I did, but what I hadn't really done. And there was something really big that I hadn't done yet. And I knew I had to come back. So coming back after you've been in the light for the second time, forget about it. I was anxious. I was depressed. I had serious trauma. I mean, anyone that has a near-death experience first has a trauma that leads to the near-death experience. So I was traumatized because of that. And I was traumatized about coming back. I felt as though I was kind of rejected. And here I had thought I had lived this incredible, beautiful, selfless life. And isn't that what we're supposed to do? And so when I came back, I had suicidal thoughts. I was a complete mess, hit the floor, rock bottom. And I wanted to get back in the light. I wanted to live my life in a way that I knew I was going to get back in. And then that just became a whole process of healing and how I healed and where that led me to my life right now. But the job was to figure out what I needed to do. And the job was to do what I had never done before. And that was love myself enough to live in alignment with my soul and that there was a purpose that I have, and living that purpose completely. It could not happen until I got back into alignment with myself and really started living the way that my soul came here to live. So it's been an extraordinary journey, painful journey. But my mission now really is like yours, to lead people to that energy of love, to bring them back to the source where they have deviated from or been out of alignment from. So that's my goal as a healer. And that's my goal in the work that I do in the spiritual world now, is to teach what really gets us to the great glories of heaven and beyond.
Wow. All right. So you shared both of the near death experience stories. I have a lot of questions. I want to go back to the first one first.
Okay, sorry.
Oh, no, no,
Yeah,
it's fine. I told you to share whatever way you felt
yeah,
drawn to share.
yeah,
So
yeah,
it was perfect.
yeah.
It was all perfect.
I do.
You do. Okay. So you're super young and you have this experience. I'm going to imagine at that point in time that you probably had not heard of a near death experience.
Mm-mm,
So it's
never.
not surprising to me that you didn't share it. But you had an experience that was a little bit, maybe it made me think, I wonder what this was. So when you said that you were in a ravine that couldn't be seen from the road. So it
Mm-hmm.
would have been nearly impossible for somebody to even know you didn't catch on fire, your car is down there. You said that there was a man in the
Yes,
ravine who said, "Help is coming soon."
yes.
Was that
Now,
a real man?
it was a real man. And in all the life that had happened, I knew him from relationships from other people. And there was a speck of a light that was reflected out of the ravine. And somebody was curious and came and drove away and then turned back around to see what that weird speck of light in this dark thing was. So that, but I do believe that that person has angel qualities. I know where he is and what he's doing in his life now, and is very
Oh,
spiritual.
really?
Yeah, so I
He
really do.
probably got guidance to come
I
back and
do. I really believe that. I'm not surprised it was that particular person, because he's very involved in social support and supporting the youth and helping the world. So I'm not surprised that out of everybody, that he was the one that was at the window that day. Yeah.
that's
So,
super cool. I
yeah.
love that.
Yeah.
Oh,
I do believe that was very divinely timed. It was a calling for him to come back. So,
that's wonderful. Okay, so you're on the other side and you're with this group of beings. So I know that these things are ineffable. They're sometimes hard. We don't have the human language, but in any way, can you explain to us what these beings look like?
yeah, it wasn't that I could identify completely their features. I felt like they were ancestors. It felt like there was some people that were ancestors, maybe my grandfather. I didn't really know him, but I was aware of whoever was there really knew me. And so that was kind of the first encounter I had, were with kind of like the beings that were feeling like were having a conversation about me and what was going to happen to me, or what would be best for me, or something of that nature. But I still was really kind of scared in a way. I didn't know where I was. I didn't know what was happening. But it wasn't until there was just, you hit this feeling of just complete love and peace, and everything's going to be okay. And so when I came back and I was in the hospital and I woke up and there was doctors kind of looking at me and fixing me, I was like, I'm already done. They already did it. Like, stop. Leave me alone.
That
Yeah.
must have been so crazy for the doctors because they wouldn't have known.
No, and I remember, and my mom kept saying, she's not like this. She's never like this. But I was so adamant that I was like, no, they did this. I'm okay. When I look back, now, like when I reflect back, because it was buried, never to think about it. And then after my second near-death experience, kind of trickling back in, I do think that what was happening was when I was being worked on, it was more spiritual gifts. It was something that I was going to bring back, that I was receiving, whether it was being implanted in my heart or implanted in my thymus or my wherever. But there was something that was happening to me. And I think in retrospect now, I haven't spoken about that before, but I think it was really probably some type of spiritual gift that was meant to help my friend.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm curious, you see these beings in this first near-death experience. Do Are there any of the same beings that you encounter in the second one?
No, I know. And I wish I could tell you more, but I just can't, except I can it's kind of like they're kind of flowing, maybe a little white, but they were just beings. Nothing that looked like they didn't have wings, and it wasn't like, oh, that's so and so. I didn't have that. It just was a sense that they knew me, and it just wasn't my time. And it was almost like there was a choice. It could be, or not. And then, like I said, the next thing really was just remembering the energy of it not being my time and that I had to come back. Yeah. And then in the second near death experience, it was much more profound. Probably because I had, I was energetically, I was different. I was probably more evolved and I had more life experiences, maybe expanded my state and had more spiritual experiences, harder times. But that one it was almost like that whole experience of crossing over was in slow motion. It was kind of happening and slowing down. And was I going to go over or not? Kind of every day in the room, was it time for me to go? And then until the one day when I just decided, and it was when I went that time, it was as if I knew everybody. It was as if everybody was recognizable to me. It wasn't like anyone was, I felt like I just knew everybody. And it was just unbelievably special. And just the energy and the love just fills and expands. And yeah, really unbelievable. I remember tears. I did not want to come back. I did not want to come back, which makes me think those feelings, there has to be, because I was on the other side and I remember whether it was just crying tears of the feeling of love, whether it was like being in the arms of the master healer and seeing his mom, or being sad that I had to come back. Could have been all three.
Wow, that's so incredible. And I love that you weren't afraid in the second one. I get everything had switched and you had a different perspective of everything.
Yeah. For me at the time when I had it, I was the executive director of a nonprofit that supported families that had cancer. And so I dealt with a lot of families and parents that were going to die from cancer. And one of the things that I remember is when I was with the kids, it was almost as if after the parents died, it was almost as if I was channeling the parent, like I was holding the child and I could sense. Now, I never told anybody that. Like, I think she wants to hug her child now. But so we would go into the homes and we'd care for these families and provide them all kinds of support. But it was so helpful for me to know that, like, I was sick, really sick, and it looked like I was really suffering. But then there was this time that there was absolutely no suffering. It was just pure acceptance and peace. And so it was as when I went to the other side, I wasn't worried. I wasn't worried about my kids. I wasn't worried about my husband. There was no worry. It was like, Cathy, they're going to be fine. They're going to be fine. And it was a very peaceful transition, which gave me hope now that I'm back. And I still do work with cancer patients, that knowing that peace is there. It's not pure suffering until the very end.
Yes, how comforting. You know, that's one of the things I love about sharing these stories over and over again. The people who have these experiences, no matter how they die, in a horrific car accident, in an illness, it doesn't seem that they suffer. It seems like before the suffering really happens, they're popped out of their body and they see it from that perspective. Their body might still be what we would consider alive, but they're
Yeah.
not in there feeling those feelings. And I think for people, when you've lost somebody from a tragedy, I think that there's a part of you that agonizes over, did this person suffer?
Yeah.
Or is there something else I could have done? And
Mhm,
then they beat themselves up for years. And from these stories and these accounts, everything is unfolding perfectly, as you said. You
mhm,
had a choice or you didn't have a choice, and
mhm.
then you didn't suffer. And I think that these are such blessings to share with the world.
It is. And the suffering is, and you can see it and you can feel it with somebody when they're getting ready to transition. The suffering is the fear. The suffering is the holding on. The suffering part, that range could be the fear of crossing over that keeps you in a state of suffering. And it was just like, oh, if everybody knew, just like, just go, make it fast, make it easy. And that the suffering really isn't that holding on and the fear, I think.
I want
Yeah.
to talk a little bit more about your boyfriend because I know you were a caregiver in a
Hmm.
big sense of that word for a long time, and he didn't recover. He had the traumatic brain injury and he could only communicate by blinking. But you mentioned you knew when he was hot or cold, you knew when he was sad. How did you know those things?
It wasn't as if I said, "Oh, I know he's this, I know he's that." It was a very silent, kind of sacred conversation that we had. It was just what was happening is Spirit was giving me this opportunity to nurture the gifts that I had received in my near-death experience. I wasn't aware of that I was manifesting and nurturing spiritual gifts of healing at that time, but this we couldn't talk. So, I mean, I would be in the room for hours, and I was 18 years old. I would go to school all day and then go to the hospital and then go to school all day and then go to the rehab and then go to school all day. It was nonstop, probably every day for years. And but the hope was that that was always going to be the day that there was some turnaround. But it was really just the feeling in the silence. I mean, you were spoken to in silence, and I was spoken to in the silence, whether it was guidance from some above place, but I just sensed it. You just sensed the suffering. And when I look back, it was the saddest days from when I would leave. The hardest days were when I knew that he was telling me, please go, like just go, like leave. I'm getting the chills now that I think about it. Just leave. And I knew that's what he wanted. And then what would his mom think if I left? What would people think if I didn't stay? These nurses are used to seeing me. I tag team with family members, like this was my time. But even though we didn't speak, I could sense his anger. I could sense his sadness, his pity for me. Like, go, just go. And so in retrospect, I'm saddest about those days. I didn't give him the moments that he needed to be alone without somebody touching him.
Interesting. So I'm curious, did you ever have any dreams of him?
Well, when he passed away, it was this time for his funeral, and they weren't going to have a eulogy. And I mean, he had been suffering for a long time. And I said, "Oh my gosh, he hasn't spoken in almost 19 years, almost 20 years. Like we gotta say something for him." So I remember I said, "I'll do the eulogy." And his mom said, "Oh, that'd be so wonderful." I was at that time, I'd never done a eulogy before. The first thing I thought was like, can I buy one? Like, how do you get eulogy?
Where's ChatGPT when we need it?
I know. I was like, a eulogy, how does that even happen? And I remember how important it was for me to do it. And I remember sitting in my bed with my computer on my lap and thinking to myself, not to myself, but saying to him in my heart, this is an opportunity for you to say something. Like, what do you want me to say for you? And literally, I'm just getting the chills now, just all of a sudden I just started typing, and it was literally a long thank you letter. And it was a thank you to the doctors and these doctors. And it was a thank you to his mom and his cousins and his brothers and sisters. And it was just what they each did for him. And that's what he really wanted to say, and where he was, all the people he wanted to, and also to reiterate or to make sure his mom knew who he was with. And I found those jeans you threw away, something like that. It was really sweet. But yeah, so that's and then I just had such a sense of terrible survivor's guilt, just terrible survivor's guilt. I just did. And I didn't really reach out to him spiritually ever. It was as I never would have asked him for a gosh darn thing. Like, let the poor guy rest in peace. Like, don't do anything for me. And then there was one time I had a cancer scare and they were going to do a biopsy. And I heard him come to me and say, I'm taking care of you now. You're going to be okay. And that was the first time that I had him had a message come to me. And I was like, really? But you don't have to. Just go enjoy the other side. Don't worry about me. Because I really had the sense that he really wanted to rest in peace. I just had a feeling. And maybe that was what I wanted for him. And that I kind of just didn't allow that conversation to happen. But now more so now, yes. Now that I'm over the guilt and the shame and I let all that stuff go. And so now I know he's a great support. And
So is he one of your spirit guides on the other side?
I believe he is. I believe he is. But I think from him, I think he's busy with his own family. I think he's got a lot of family, but I think he is one. I think that he was trying to be one for a long time, and my guilt and my shame just got in the way. But I think he was just patient. And now I think he just appreciates the conversations that we have. I don't ask him to do any work. Periodically, I'll see him and kind of surprise me that he's present.
What do you mean see him? How, in what way?
I'll see, sense, kind of see them like if I'm in the middle of a healing session or something and there's family or friends. Yeah, you can see the spirit. You sense the spirit, the power that they're there and something will happen. When I
And
do,
you didn't see him on the other side, did you?
no.
Okay.
Mm-mm. And but
Same.
again, I do think that I was blocking it. I just felt so sad. I just felt that's my sadness and my fear, I think just got in the way. When I look at him now, like I'm feeling him right now, like laughing about it. Like, can you like he did say, I wish I had written it down. He did say some things to me, but I just never wanted them to sink in. I just didn't allow myself that. I didn't allow the words of the kind words that he said really sink in. Because I hadn't believed it myself about myself, so I wouldn't. But yeah, so boy,
So
did he.
yeah, I'm sorry that he did. But I'm so glad that you're connected to him because on the other side, our soul can never be harmed and he's whole and
Oh yeah.
perfect.
Oh, whole and perfect and just where he needs to be. And all the suffering that he did, he's so helpful on the other side. So, so, so helpful. But I wish, and people would always say to you, I really sense a spirit. What about Tim? What about Tim? I'm not gonna bother him. I'm gonna let him go. Well, he'll show up.
Yeah.
So, but when I do work now, I work with, it's kind of, there's different people, different spirit that come for different situations. He's more of like a life help, I think. More of like, I got your back, more like a little tingle if I should leave a room or go home type of thing. Yeah. Not so much in the energy healing that I do with clients, but I think he's just more for me. And
Yeah.
as I'm saying it, it just feels so good.
Oh, I love that. That's
Yeah.
wonderful. That's wonderful. All
Yeah.
right, I want to go back to your second near-death experience because it was so different from the first one. And you mentioned that you heard this beautiful music coming from the Seraphim angels. So, for the people who don't know, will you explain what Seraphim angels are?
Okay. From what my understanding.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. It's like the angels that are there right before God, right before you get to source. That's just, there's those levels. You have the archangels and you have seraphim angels. And they were just like these, it was almost as if they were so big and
What do you mean big, like tall,
like
large?
energetically just big and just real. Like, you know how I envision like Michael the Archangel, like big,
Yes.
but these were just really big angels and the voices. It was just, it's not so much about how they looked, it's just how they felt. And it's so interesting since that near death experience, a lot of healing comes in the sound of a spiritual song, a religious song. I'll hear a religious song and in that religious song is a message. But the music at that time was just so powerful, so powerful. But it was as if like you go to meet, not that I ever did, but if you met like a king or queen and they have this like all this here comes the queen. It was kind of like here you're going to meet your source. And it was just, I wish I could tell you the song. People have asked me that. I don't
That was
remember.
where I was going. I wanted to know if there's
I don't
anything even
know.
close that you've heard
I
that
don't
sounded like it.
know. I wish I just, you know how, I mean, sound has such a just says it's so healing. And whatever the tones were, the notes were, I just remember it was so healing. I wish there's some things I wish I could just say, but I would know, but I just can't. I just don't know.
So you also are on the other side and you're having a completely different experience. Did you have any kind of a life review in this second one?
When I was sitting in, and I think I want to say this, and I know that you guys have talked about it a lot, that I saw the master healer, and I truly believe that when you go to the other side, you return to where you believe that you came from. You go back to your source, you go back, and you're going to recognize yours, whether it's Buddha or Allah or whoever you're going to be, whose arms you long to be in, the Yoganandas, whoever. I believe those are the arms that you're going to fall into. That's the energy that you're going to go back to. That's just my truth. Everybody's going to have their own. So yeah, what-
No. So when you were saying no, you were so that's perfect. When you were saying the master healer, what do you mean by that?
I mean, Jesus. I mean, Jesus. So
Okay.
Jesus. Yeah. And to
You
me,
did.
he
Oh,
is,
I didn't realize
yeah,
that.
yeah, Jesus. I call him the master healer.
No, I call them ascended master. So I think that there are so many names for him. So can you
Yeah.
describe visually what you saw and energetically what you saw or
Oh,
felt?
oh gosh, it gives me so I saw him as I would recognize him. Saw him,
Okay.
so I look at my Jesus and how he looks with the hair and the heart. It was just this heart. It was the heart. Um, and just seeing his heart, being in his heart. And I remember I was hearing the music and I was just like, oh, I'm here. Oh, I'm so here. This is so great. And then I remember seeing him and it was as if his energy was like kind of coming towards me and I was going towards it. And it was like this hallmark moment, like, here I am, here you are, type of thing. And as we got closer, I mean, the love was just unbelievable. But I knew that he was going to tell me, or we were going to have a conversation that was going to have me go back. I just knew it. I knew it when I fell into his arms. And I remember him just being there and feeling the source of love and then seeing his mother, just like this huge energy of love. Oh, so much love, all this heart. It was as heart to heart. There was so much heart energy. And in that time, there was some type of quiet conversation that was had. Like you said, a life review. Like, hey, wasn't that great that I did that and took care of all those cancer patients and took care of all those brain injured people and I gave up all the cookies at lunch and I mean everything that I'm thinking,
I love
all the
you.
stuff I gave. I mean, anything that you think that you're like sacrificing for the greater good. And he just said no. And I remember the feeling of, I don't get it. How? Really? That wasn't kind of enough what I did? That's not gonna, it's not, that wasn't what you wanted? All that I did for all those people? And no, you have more work. You have more work. And I just was devastated. I didn't want to leave. I just did not want to leave. Now, in retrospect, it had to have been my choice, right? Really.
Because free will is the thing that rules the
Yeah.
universe,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. So it had to be my choice. And I knew that there was more work. I knew that there was more healing work to do. I knew that I hadn't done it. And I knew I hadn't done whatever healing I was supposed to do. But there was something bigger than that. And that really goes back to the energy of love. It goes back to the fact that I had so much love for so many people. Anyone that came my way, I would have given them the pots and pans out of my kitchen, the coat off my back, the last $20 out of my wallet. Period. Hands down. Not even a question. But all those things I would have never done for myself. And
Was that the lesson you had to come
that
back
was
for?
the
It
last,
was, oh, how interesting. I love this conversation so much, Kathy, because
yeah,
right now, this is where you get the big chance to help everybody who's watching who are never going to have a near death experience to understand how important it is to have self love and self care. So
yeah.
tell us what you learned from this.
I learned that I know gosh darn thing about myself because it was one of those like, okay, I got to figure this out. what the heck is going to get me in that light? And I'm going to stay there. Because if I go back, like I'm going to be like Teresa, the low flower. I'm going to do my work over there. Like I'm done here. I'll do all the work over there. I will send you flowers. I'll give you whatever. I'll send you coin. I'll do whatever you need. But I wanted to figure out what it was that was going to get me over there to keep me to stay there. And I wanted to do it because that's what I knew my soul's purpose was. How could I not know what my purpose was? How could I not know what I needed to be doing? And so when I came back, I just knew the only thing that I hadn't done was myself. I just had never, I didn't even know my favorite color. I didn't know my favorite food. I didn't know what someone asked me once, like, what's your favorite room in your house? I don't know. I move through them so much. I'm never sitting and being contemplative or, whatever. I just didn't know anything about myself. I spent my entire life being prepared, like so many of us, prepared, so dialed into other people's needs that we are literally know they're hungry before we know we're hungry ourselves. We want to feed them before we feed ourselves. We want to know what they want to eat before we know what we need to eat. And that's just the way I lived. And it was just really figuring out who I was and having those conversations of like, okay, who are you? What do you want? Where did we go wrong? And I spent a lot of time in nature, a lot of long, quiet hikes, a lot of really grounding, not knowing I was grounding, not knowing I was listening to my higher self. And then I got really into really clearing and healing my chakras, my energy field. I had to get rid of every emotion that was blocking my light of clarity. I had to get rid of
Okay,
the
I love this and I want to know more because I think people have this perception, misperception, I think in a lot of cases that in order to heal, you got to go somewhere else. Somebody else has to come in. Somebody else has to clear your chakras. Somebody else has to create this place of love for you. And it sounds like you figured this out on your own. So where did you start and what did you do?
Well, I had, when I had cancer, I had done energy healing work. I had a chakra healer, and that was when I was in my 30s. And all these years fast forward, I'm like, okay, I'm going to try this energy healing stuff again. And I came across a healer, learned how to study under her. Her name was Deborah King, and it was really wonderful. I learned energy healing modalities and really how to heal myself. I really didn't know how
Is this
to.
something that anybody can learn?
We're going to learn it right now. We're going to learn it right now. This is so easy. What it was, self-love. Everyone's like, self-love. Well, how do I love myself? I mean, I would look in the mirror and think, I love myself, but I wish you were 10 pounds lighter. I like, okay, I love you. Like, it's like, I love you. It's like saying, I love you. Yeah, I love myself. I don't understand how much more I can love myself. What I needed to love was my spirit. I didn't appreciate
Mm.
my spirit. I didn't appreciate me. I didn't appreciate my energy. Loving myself, it just didn't feel right. But when I thought about loving the spirit of me, who I am, the majority of me with outside my body, because that's what's going to go to heaven. What did I love about myself?
Mm.
And what was in the way of me expanding and healing and getting rid of the guilt. Our energy field is fueled by our chakras, which are fueled by emotions. And I had to get in touch with my emotions, which ones were dark and low, and which ones needed to be clear. And I knew, I don't know, but I knew if I had to go, people describe me as one way. I knew that's what I wasn't giving myself. So if I was so
Wait a
kind,
minute, say that again. If somebody described you as one way, you knew that wasn't what you were giving yourself. So if they're saying, "Oh, she's so loving and giving," you knew you weren't being loving and giving
and
to
giving to
yourself because
myself,
they're feeling it and you're just giving that
I was
away?
just giving it. I was just like, here, take
Okay.
it.
Okay.
Okay, take it. It was the stuff that I was being to everybody else, I had to be to myself. So I was inconsiderate to myself. I wasn't taking anything that I had, I was for somebody else. And it was almost like I was the opposite. And so how could I be more kind to myself? How could I be more generous to myself? What could I give to myself to fill me up? And it was very small increments of just being with myself, quiet, a lot of quiet, without doing, a lot of contemplative time, a lot of time in nature, a lot of meditation, a lot of prayer. Just to,
Love this. This is so practical for the people who are listening or like, where do I start? Okay, start by going in nature and being quiet and thinking. And then I love the start to observe what other people are telling you that you are to them and then realizing, oh, shoot, that's probably not what I am to myself.
likely, yeah. I mean, because I gave the best of myself to everybody else. And it
And what's
was
the danger in doing that? What's the danger in doing that?
the danger is that our energy, we need input, we need to receive. Our energy is flowing and moving. And if it's, I'm just constantly exhaling and giving out and giving out, what am I receiving? And that flow of energy is what really keeps us healthy, the giving and the receiving. And my indoor was closed. I'm not surprised I was so sick over my lifetime because I just wasn't receiving universal energy. I was so blocked. I was so blocked to the idea that I would be worthy of it.
Oh
Oh,
my gosh. I know. So I'm having an epiphany right now. I know somebody who needs to hear this so desperately.
yeah, well, good. Well, they hopefully they listen to your show.
They do.
Yeah, and so I was like, oh, okay, I got to just open that up, and say things to yourself even if you don't believe them. I really didn't believe I loved myself, but I told myself I love myself every day. I
Kathy,
told
I
myself,
love your saying. I love that you're saying this. I did a whole video called the mirror exercise.
did you?
And it starts with, I think most people, if they don't really love themselves, they cannot look in the mirror, even faking it, and say, I love myself. But what if they could start with, I'm kind of okay? And
Yeah.
I have a whole story I talk about my son when he was in school. He one day declared he didn't like school. I was like, what's going on? Like, is he getting beat up? Is there something
Yeah.
that's happening that's wrong? Or does he have any friends? And I asked around and I talked to him, and none of those things applied. He just decided he didn't like school. And I knew I couldn't tell him he had to like school. So we started this exercise of school is kind of okay. And then we worked up to the point where I might kind of like it, to the point where we could get to he liked it, until where we could get to where he loved it. And it was a gradual exercise, and it just became like a habit.
Oh, I love that. I love it. And that's basically the same thing here. Everyone's like, oh, love yourself, self-love, love yourself, self-love. It sounds so easy, but the majority of us are like, am I really doing that? Am I really loving myself? Is going to the movies by myself and eating a bucket of popcorn, is that really love? Taking time for yourself is really great, but you got to love yourself. Love the fact that you're a lover. Love the fact that you're kind. Love the fact that you're generous. Love the fact that you're intuitive. There's so many other parts of us that we can fall in love with. So it's like, what do you love about yourself? Well, I do have on the thinner leg side. That's great for my grandmother, but that's not what I love about myself. I love the fact that my heart connects to Jesus. I love the fact there's so many other parts of me that I can focus on. When we focus on those parts, that's when, oh, we really expand.
I never liked my legs for a really long time, like most of my life. I just didn't like them. My dad used to make fun of me and called me stubs. Like everything on my body is long except for my legs. But there was a point when I realized that my legs were really strong and they're able to do things other people aren't, like climbing mountains, climbing down into the Grand Canyon and going across and back 43
Yeah,
miles, and
yeah,
climbing 14ers. Like they might be short and stubby, but they're super strong. And so I
yeah,
had to learn to love them in a different way. It's not the traditional how they look to everybody
yeah.
else, but man, I wouldn't trade them for anything.
Yeah, see, that's such a great thing to look at. That's so great. And it's so true. If we just looked at the alternative and your gratitude for your legs that they can take you up a mountain.
I
I mean,
know.
even if I just said thank, like, look, I can totally identify, even as much work as I've done, it's still kind of like, I love you. Yeah, I love you. Oh, do I gotta say that to you still? Are we still there? It's what I do. But I can say thank you. Thank you. Thank you for being you.
Yes.
Thank you for what you're doing. Thank you. Be grateful for myself. Gratitude. That's great love, you
I
know.
think it's easier if you can get yourself, this is going to sound crazy, get a magnifying mirror. You can't see your whole body. Get really close and just look into your eyes, only your eyes. The
Mm,
eyes are the window to the soul. And if you can stare directly into your eyes to see the soul and spirit inside, I think it's easier to connect to that than it is to stand in front of a mirror. Because what do? We go to all the things that we know bother us, and
yeah.
then we can't get away from them. We almost have to go so micro focused that it allows us to have a bigger macro focus.
I love that. I love that image of that small magnifying mirror in your eye. I love that. Such a
We
great.
always are learning from each other. I love this so
I
much.
know. I did
The best.
too. I
All right,
know.
we've been talking for a long time, and I want to hear a little bit more if you still have time. Will you share a couple of your shared death experiences? Because I think these are so impactful for people as well.
I do. And one of the things that I think that we all have to remember is that if we sense it, let's honor, trust it, trust whatever you're sensing, trust what you're feeling. And I remember when my dad was dying, and I'm in a pretty conservative family, and so the type of things that I talk about are really out there. It's not that. So I'm watching my dad die, and then suddenly, kind of back where I was with my boyfriend, kind of sensing, oh, this is what he needs. Kind of, I'm one of five kids, and my brothers and sisters, my mom, everyone was there. So I wanted to say certain things, but then I didn't want to make it awkward or weird for them. And then finally, I just was like, Dad, take the hands. And it was if I could see the people coming, and I was with him as he was going over, that energy just, you can sense that energy, the love and the force. And he was going, and he was resisting, and he was literally clenching the bed, and I could see people coming for him. And I said, Dad, take their hands. And it was as if these like gold, beautiful hands were coming down, and just really one really big, strong, powerful one. And it was my dad's very best friend that died in Vietnam. And my dad, and I said, he grab his hand, grab Tom's hand, grab his hand. He's coming for you. And because you could sense other people were coming, and it was like, I'm not sure I can trust that. Is that for real? Oh, I'm getting chills now when I think about it again. His friend reaching down for him, and then seeing him see his parents, and seeing him see his parents at the spiritual level, and then seeing my dad's tear as soon as he saw his parents, he was dying, but he was crying. You could see that it was just the tears of joy as soon as he saw his parents. I never experienced anything like that before ever. I mean, I had experienced ancestor ascended masters in my healing sessions with people, and really extremely powerful healing sessions. But I hadn't, and I had been to the other side, but I hadn't been to the other side with somebody else as they were crossing over. And because it was my dad, it was extraordinarily special to be able to know that I was with him, and that I knew and I trusted that I saw where he was. And he went straight in and straight up. And that was really powerful. But another near-death experience that I had, that was of my really dear friend. She was dying of cancer, and she didn't want to see she didn't want her daughter and her husband to witness her in the end. And so from my friend and I sat by her side morning and night, and in that stage of not sure, she was afraid. She was terrified to go to the other side, terrified. And we'd be whispering in her ear and telling her it's okay. And one day I remember I woke up in the morning, and they said I was guided to take her on a kind of a journey of what she'd be able to do. So I laid next to her in her bed and said, let's do some astral traveling. Let's go to your house. And I can remember kind of like bringing her to see that she could see that she could go to her home where she lived. She was in the hospital, and then she could go see her daughter and her daughter's university, just kind of going different places and seeing how her body would be free. And I was convinced that she was still afraid. And I knew, because she had told me this, that she was afraid that she would be alone on the other side, that she didn't really know enough people that had passed away. And I laid in bed with her, and I asked my guides to come forward and introduce themselves to her so that she would see them when she crossed over. So we were kind of having these little experiences while she was dying, in the dying process, over the course of a few days. And the day that she actually decided that it was time, that she was ready to go, again, she was so terrified. And I sat next to her bed, and I just knew I knew it was time. She couldn't possibly suffer anymore. And I think she was so tired of everybody talking around her. She just was tired of being in the room and people coming in and out and touching her. And I said, okay, let's go. Are you ready? Let's go. I mean, her heart was beating. Okay, I said, I'm going to take you. I'm going to hold your hand the entire way. I'm going to hold your hand the entire way that we go over. And she started to go, and I could feel her and sense her, and was with her spirit. And all of a sudden we came to this big dark tunnel. And I had never seen, like, I'd never been afraid. I'd never been personally afraid to go through. My first near-death experience, there was a sense of a pull and a tunnel, but it wasn't like anything I was terrified of. I was happy to go. She stood in front of that tunnel and she would not go. And I said, you can do this. You can do this. I'll hold your hand. I'll hold your hand. And then we would run through the tunnel and she'd get a quarter away and then she'd run back. And then she'd run and I'd say, oh, come on, we got to do this, Cam. We got to do this. You can do it. You can do it. And then she'd start running and then she'd come back. And then she did it about 4 times. And then I said to her, just keep going. Don't stop. Keep going. I promise you, I'll be there with you until you get through. And it was if she just kind of closed her eyes and she just ran. Oh, just still gives me a chills. She just ran and ran and ran and ran. And then when she got through, I was with her when she went through and she got right to the light. And then everybody that came to greet her in the hospital lined up to greet her when she got to the other side. And as she was on the other side, and it was like a long line. I mean, I have full body chills right now. It was of all the people that came to greet her. And she just fell into it. And then I remember saying, there he is. And she prayed to Jesus and she was very spiritual, very prayerful. And then that was it. I just remember saying, there he is. And then seeing them unite and then I came back. And my energy field had been so expanded because I had never gone that far. I'd never gone that far. I'd never had a near-death experience that lasted that long, that had gone that far. So it was so unbelievably powerful. And what a gift it was to be there with her. And I did tell her, send me some feathers. You're going to get your angel wings and send me a feather when you get your wings. And sure enough, I could have made a pillow with every feather I got after she went over. And then she showed me herself.
Yeah.
She came to me the next day in meditation and I would lie in bed with her and say, you're going to have all your hair back and you're going to be able to wear your fancy dresses. And she came back and showed me she was in her dress and her hair was done and showed me her wings and she went off and did good work. Yeah.
That's incredible. I'm
Yeah.
so glad that you shared these stories. I have a question about Jesus. So, you went off after all these experiences and you became a minister. And you
Well, no,
talked
no.
about, no?
My first one, I was a minister. The first near-death experience, I just felt like I was, you know, in the religious, just wanted to be with it. So the first one, but then I became much more spiritual after the second one.
Okay, so that's what I was going to ask you. So, you called Jesus the master and you've referred to him and you've had several experiences, and I know he's part of how you're able to heal. Who is he?
He is, to me, just a source of love and light and somebody that I want to live like. I want to emulate everything that he did because his existence was pure love. He loved completely and no fear, no attachments, nothing, and just trusting that the energy of love and trusting that we will always be loved by a source. And so I want to kind of have a heart like him. I want to love everybody. I want to help everybody. I want to see the world through his eyes and see the world through his mom's eyes. See the world through an ascended master's eyes. See it that way. Make your decisions from somebody that's looking at it from a different lens than we
Well,
are.
how is that different than the way that people see him through a religious lens?
Well, the difference is that when the religious lens is that he is just, that God, that our source is just and we have to be a certain way and he's there and we're here and he's the almighty and we are nothing and I mean, I went to Catholic school, I went to mass all the time, and one of the things that we say is, Lord, I'm not worthy to receive you. I'm like, what the heck? I said that my whole entire life. I'm worthy to receive him. So the difference is that he's human and alive to me, human and alive, and my friend and someone that's here for me. And if I look at him from the dogma and from that religious perspective, he's somebody that is unattainable to be or to get to.
I think that's super helpful. Thank you so much for sharing that. So, if
Yeah.
people have connected with you today and they want to work with you, how can they find you?
They can get me on my website, cathygabrielsen.com, and on Facebook, Cathy Gabrielsen Healing, and on Instagram. Pretty simple. I just use my name over and over. There's no There's nothing else. So, and
And I love that you have Gabriel, like the angel, in your name.
oh yeah, he's good. Gabriel, I know. And he's a very good messenger.
Well,
Yeah.
this has
Oh,
been so much fun. I loved our conversations today. I loved all the things that you shared. I mean, what a blessing. Thank you so much for everything you are doing to help wake up the collective consciousness.
and thank you for everything you're doing because you're doing so many amazing things and bringing so much to so many people. So thank you so much for having me. And I'm so glad that our paths met. No
Me
surprise.
too. Oh, me too. And thank you so much for everybody who got to the end of this and are right there with us. There's no
Yeah.
accident in that either. Thank you so much for watching.
Thank you.
Next up, check out this playlist of other NDE interviews. Please like and subscribe. It really helps this channel to grow so I can bring you more content. Thank you for watching. I'm so glad you're here.